At the facility where I work, every year we take a group of residents on an overnight camping trip. And when I tell people that, they usually look at me like I'm crazy. Taking 12, 13, 14 people in various stages of memory loss on an overnight camping trip is a major endeavor. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. But one thing I'm often asked about that and other things that we do is people will say things like, why do you do that if they're not going to remember? And that always takes me aback because it shows how much people don't understand what we do and why we do it. If we're not going to do things because they won't remember, we might as well just park our loved one in the corner and have them stare at the wall all day. So we really need to look back on that quote that we talked about in emotional memory, that our loved ones might not remember what we say or what we did, but they will remember how we made them feel. So if we can fill our days with positive experiences, it's going to fill them with those feelings of joy and make both of your lives much easier and much more pleasant. So there are many purposes for activities. The first one being simply to have fun. Doing the things that you may have done throughout your life. Going for a walk, dancing, listening to music. All that is just kind of fun. Another purpose is bonding. The relationship changes a lot when you're caregiving, but if you can do those things that you once did or do things where having fun and having positive experiences, it can really help you feel connected, whether it's as a couple or as a mother and daughter, father, son, anything like that. It can help strengthen that relationship again. Humans need socialization. They need to feel part of a bigger group. They need to interact with other people. So doing activities, especially bigger activities or going places, kind of meets that emotional need that we have. Activities can also promote fitness. Whether it's going for a walk, doing chair exercises, gardening, all those things can help prevent your loved one from physically deteriorating and needing to be moved into a more restrictive facility like a nursing home or a memory care. Activities can also provide us with a sense of accomplishment. So especially with things like art projects or projects around the house, having something finished and accomplished that you can show really gives you that sense of accomplishment, like you did something that day. Keeping the day full can also reduce those challenging behaviors. Remember, those challenging behaviors that we talk about are really just expressions of unmet needs. And oftentimes that's boredom. If you've been sitting around and you haven't been doing anything all day, you've got a lot of kind of pent up energy and it can come out in a negative way. They're also great for you. They make the day go by. Especially if you're the only caregiver, every day can feel like Groundhog's Day, where it's you wake up, you do the same thing, you have the same conversations, the same problems, and then you go to bed and you do it again the next day. So if we can do different things each day and fill them with positive activities, it's great for both of you. So when we're coming up with activities, the first thing we want to do is take a look back on your loved one's life. What were their hobbies and their interests? They're obviously more likely to enjoy things that they previously enjoyed in life. People will surprise us many times, but that's usually a good place to start. And we may have to adapt these to suit their current abilities. So instead of maybe doing woodworking in a shop with power tools and things like that, you might be able to change it to kind of simpler glue together wood models, or maybe soap carving where the tools aren't quite as dangerous. But we also need to keep in mind that it can be very frustrating, especially if our loved one is really good at doing something, to not be able to do what they once could. I had a woman move into the facility who was a professional watercolor painter, made beautiful paintings. So we wanted to bring her down to art therapy. But very quickly, while she was down there, we could see that it was more frustrating for her than it was rewarding, because it was a reminder to her of the things that she could no longer do. So that is something that you need to watch out for. We also need to keep in mind their daily routines and how their days were structured. What was their lifestyle at work? Was it fast-paced, slow-paced? Were they busy? Were they more relaxed? Did they work in creative things like art? Or were they on computers all day? Did they like to work outside? These are all things that we can look at to try to figure out what they might enjoy doing throughout their day. Remember, our loved ones might be kind of living in a different time period in their life. As the disease advances, they often work backwards. So they might be thinking that they're in their 20s or their 30s or even their teens, and they might want relevant tasks that they would have been doing at that time. Like I said, they could be in their school days, dating, working, etc. I had a woman who was a very accomplished lawyer, who really liked proofreading our policy and procedure manuals. If she was getting anxious or maybe wanting to leave, we could give her one of those manuals and she would flip through it and look for errors and look at the policies. And she was in moderate to late moderate stage of dementia and enjoyed doing that because that's a task that she would have done previously in her life. Now, there are a lot of different types of activities. First thing we want to talk about are probably the most apparent, and the first thing that you would think of would be the cards and puzzles and games and things like that. The bingo, the card games. This is another time when we want to play games that they might have been playing throughout their life. I'm from Michigan, so the popular game here is euchre. I also have a lot of residents that enjoyed playing bridge, rummy, different games like that. We can usually if it's a game that somebody's played for a long time, they can carry that ability well into the moderate and early late stages of dementia. You may need to modify the rules a little bit or make new rules or let some things slide, but they can still be a lot of fun. One of the things that we do at my facility is we'll play the game Uno, and depending on where the particular group of residents is at in their journey and their ability, we might take out the action cards. So if you're familiar with Uno, it's kind of a matching game where you've got to match either a color or a number and go around, and the first person that runs out of cards wins. But there are also cards in there like where you would reverse the order that you're going around the table, or you'd skip somebody, or you draw a certain number of cards, and those can be a little overwhelming and confusing. But if we take those out, it makes it a lot easier and makes it a little faster to play. You can also make up your own game. I had a gentleman who was kind of very high anxiety, very active, and couldn't quite follow along with any rules of a game or anything like that. So we sat down on a table one day, and I gave him half the cards and gave myself half the cards, and we just kind of started flipping cards over and matching colors, and then I'd say, oh yeah, you win that one, and then scoot it over, and we'd go back and forth, and we spent probably a half hour doing that, and we were both laughing and having fun. We weren't playing any actual game, there weren't rules, there wasn't a winner or a loser, but it was a fun and positive experience. And those are fairly easy to come up with. Remember, we don't want to correct our loved ones, so we want to connect. So we might have to let some rules slide. You might skip somebody's turn, or they might not quite follow along, but it's generally better just to kind of keep playing and keep having fun than it is to try to correct them and argue. Puzzles are great, especially if you can find things that they recognize or enjoy. So if they like dogs, a puzzle with dogs. If they like barns, a puzzle with barns. And you can also actually get your own puzzles printed. Puzzleprint.com is one of the places. There's a bunch of them. It's usually about $20, and you can pick how many pieces you want and what size you want. And you could actually get a picture of your family or a picture of your house or anything else that might be important to that person. In the early stages, generally 500 to 1,000 piece puzzles are okay. In the middle stages, we want to reduce it down to the 100 to 200. And in the late stage, less than 50. And they go all the way down to 6-piece puzzles that have very large pieces the size of an index card that are easier for the people in later stages. And with the puzzles, you might have to help out. You might have to give some hints, get things kind of started. But encourage your person as they're doing it and kind of congratulate them as they get pieces. Make it fun and make it an interactive experience with them. Household tasks are also great activities throughout the day. Have them do the tasks that they're good at or familiar with. So whether it's sweeping, dusting, doing the dishes, organizing nuts and bolts and screws, polishing silverware. I would generally say don't use actual silverware polish because I think that can be pretty toxic. But especially if you maybe have some people coming over, you can say, okay, let's get all our spoons and forks and knives cleaned up here, and just give them a rag that they can kind of buff it and clean it up a little bit. Also, like folding laundry, especially napkins, towels, things that are easy and square or rectangular. And if it's something that your loved one enjoys, you can actually take that box of folded towels and go unfold them and bring them right back and do it again. Gardening is something I really enjoy doing with my residents. Because it's easy to meet them where they are with their ability. So especially if you have something like a raised bed where even somebody in a wheelchair can safely get up and work on it, you can modify it to have them do what they are capable of doing. So they might just plant the seeds, they might rake or dig the holes or do the watering, trim things. Just can find those tasks that they're able to do. And in a later slide, we'll talk about how to incorporate the different senses and how that relates to gardening and really making it a more profound experience. Arts and crafts are also very popular. When we do these, we want to focus on the experience and the process and now the outcome. I'd say most people aren't great artists. You can't go out and draw a picture of a beautiful sailboat and on a wavy sea. But you can create some sort of art and have fun doing it. Something that's become more common in the recent years are adult coloring books. The reason we want adult ones is because we don't want to infantilize our loved one. We don't want to treat them as a child. So these can be very therapeutic. Even people in their 20s and 30s and 40s are doing these as a form of stress release. And you can kind of focus in on them and really create some very cool drawings. Watercolors are also great. They're inexpensive. You can get non-toxic ones, clean up pretty easily. The one thing I would say with these, though, is whatever you're using to hold the water to dip your brush in, it's helpful to have it not look like a cup that they would normally drink. So things that are lower or opaque sides, because very often people want to try to drink the cup. So just be conscientious of that and find a shallow reservoir to use to dip the brush. We really enjoy kind of milking holidays for all that they're worth, creating all sorts of activities around them. So whether it's decorating a tree or making an ornament, making sock turkeys for Thanksgiving, there's lots of different things that you can make with things laying around the house that are kind of fun and crafty. Pinterest is a great place to find these. So if you search, holiday decorations or even activities for dementia or arts and crafts for seniors, there's lots of things that pop up. So I'd encourage you to pop over there and check those out. Reminiscing is also a really powerful tool for engagement. And it's something that most people wouldn't necessarily think of as an activity, but it really is. As we've talked about many times, most of our loved ones can remember their earlier lives quite well. We might need to help them kind of add details or cue and bring in reminders of different people or different stories or events. But usually once they start talking about it, they can remember a lot of those things. One thing that I've done successfully with many people in moderate and later stages, it's actually amazing how well they can remember these early details. One of the things that I've done recently with some ladies in their 80s in the moderate stages of dementia is ask them for their childhood address. And it's been surprising how many have been able to remember it. And now with technology, I can actually put that address in on Google, and more often than not, it will bring up a street view of the house as it is currently. And if it happens to be the same house, if they haven't demolished it or anything, showing that picture and talking about it really brings back a lot of memories. We've gotten on the computer and driven up and down the streets, and they've talked about their neighbor's house and the person that used to live over here, and their friend lived on this corner, and they used to always climb this tree. And those memories remain very vivid. That was something I was able to do without having a lot of information from the person, but just pulling out that one detail and being able to grow off of that. So if you are a family member and you've known this person your whole life, you can likely cue those memories and bring up the familiar stories and people and places. You might have some old photographs to go through yourself. So instead of relying on Google, you can bring up the actual old pictures of the house or the wedding albums or things like that and go through those. Like we talked about in the communication module, though, is I would discourage you from doing too much quizzing. The folks tend to not respond well to saying, "Who is this? Do you remember this?" So if you can kind of fill in those details or start the ball rolling and then let them continue talking about it, it generally will go better. Because if you start asking these questions and showing them these pictures and they don't know the answers, it's going to turn into a negative experience for them. People also love talking about their accomplishments. So whether it's a 10-point buck, graduating college, teaching their kid how to ride a bike, some accomplishment they had at work, people really enjoy talking about those things. And those memories usually stick very well. So you can talk about those and let them relive that. Also, though, you don't only have to talk about the good things. I had a gentleman that I worked with who pretty much every night when he'd get ready for bed would tell stories about the war, and he had been drafted. He did not want to go. It was not a positive experience for him. But to him, it was something that he felt he needed to talk about, and it was therapeutic for him to be able to have somebody listen. So there might be some negative things that come up, and you don't want to immediately pull away from those. They might be bringing those up for a reason, and they might need to talk about them. And during this reminiscing is a great time to get out the voice or video recorder. So one thing we don't often think of until after somebody is gone is hearing their voice or seeing their face or hearing their laugh. So as much as possible, get these stories recorded. Kim recently lost her uncle. He was a World War II vet and kind of lived this wild and crazy life. And we were lucky enough at a couple recent family get-togethers when him and Kim's dad actually were really shooting the breeze. I was able to get it recorded. So now we have those captured forever, and we can share them with the other family members. So outings are great, and they can be purposeful and intentional, or just kind of a way to get out of the house. So things like museums, nature centers, parks, botanical gardens can all be great. I know a lot of people are big sports fans, but especially as we get into the later stages, it might be really difficult to go to, say, a college game or a professional game for the team that they always liked. But you can also look at local school teams or little league teams to go to a baseball game or a football game where it's not as expensive. It might be a little bit easier to access, less traffic, things like that. So look for these things in your community that you can go out and do. Most of them might be free or inexpensive and fairly accessible. Or you can just go out for a drive. I've talked to so many people that say, my loved one is anxious and wants to leave and wants to do this, and I'm having this problem. But if we get in the car and go for a drive, that all stops. That's what they want to do. It's very common for our loved ones to want to go for a drive or want to go for a ride. And it might symbolize something. They're not comfortable wherever they are. We always hear about, I want to go home, even if we are home. But even taking that step and getting in the car, that could kind of symbolize going home. It also symbolizes that freedom. We first get our licenses, and that's when we really feel free to go. So drives can be very therapeutic, especially if you want to drive somewhere beautiful. We're lucky to have nice rolling farm hills and some nice rivers and things like that. So driving around and pointing things out, or even pulling over and looking at various things, can be a really pleasant experience and easy to do. We talked a little bit about socialization earlier, and it's really, really important for us humans to socialize. We need to feel part of a bigger group or a bigger thing, and we need to interact with people. So this could just be calling friends, chatting on the phone, plan get-togethers with friends or family members, visiting your loved one if they have moved into a care facility, and participating in the events. That can be, especially if your visits tend to be a little difficult, if you can time them, talk to the people that work there and figure out when there's something going on that they enjoy, like a concert or a certain group that they like, and do that with them. So there's a little less pressure on you to have to drive a conversation or answer questions or things like that, and you can have that positive experience. So in the early moderate stages, you can go to different social groups, professional groups, go find speakers. If your loved one has been in the Rotary or Red Hat Society or anything like that, more often than not, they are very receptive to that person coming, even if they are into the moderate stages of dementia or maybe a little bit disruptive. They're usually very understanding. Same goes for church groups and things like that. You may need to accompany your loved one to these things, especially as we get into the moderate stages. But you may be able to then kind of take a step back. So you need to be there in case something happens or something pops up, but you might be able to sit in the back and read your book or just do something like that and give yourself a little bit of a break. Another thing that we like to do a lot, in residential settings are theme days. So there's all sorts of silly holidays that you can find. National Pie Day, Flower Day. There's also charity theme days. There's Breast Cancer Month. We have the longest day, which is June 21st for Alzheimer's awareness and fundraising, so you can tap into those and just kind of create a daily calendar based on those activities. There's national sports days, Italian days, all sorts of different things. So you can check this nationaltoday.com /National Day Calendar and find these. So if it's National Hot Dog Day, maybe you spend the morning talking about hot dogs. You might have hot dogs for lunch and turn it into a whole day experience. We can also do this with things like opening day for baseball. So, every year, generally when we have our opening day, we'll start off our morning with chat about the history of baseball and talk about famous baseball players. Might do some sort of baseball-themed exercise or game after that. And then when it does come time to watch the game, we'll get, hot dogs and Cracker Jacks and things like that and bring it up on the big screen and kind of make it feel like as much of that experience as if they were going to the game. That can be a lot of fun, and it can be a way to come up with things when you might be having trouble doing so. This is a great chart that can put together that kind of shows how you can make activities for people in different stages. So in the early stages of dementia, you can kind of focus on the whole task. So maybe following a recipe and cooking something, wrapping the presents for the holidays, planting flowers in the garden and maintaining them. And then in the mid stages, you might have to break it down into steps. So you might have to measure out the ingredients for them and have them put them in the pot. And then maybe they can stir them or whisk them. You may have them cut paper or put the tissues in the bags or put the bows on presents. They might not be able to do the whole wrapping process. And then maybe the gardening at that point is picking out which flowers and plants they want. Filling pots with the soil, amending the soil, watering, things that are a little bit easier. And then in the late stages, we want to focus more on the sensory experience. So if we're on the recipe thing, just touching the ingredients, smelling and discussing the spices, tasting things. Those taste and smell are still very much alive, even in the later stages. So for the wrapping presents example, they might just kind of scrunch tissue, sort the bows around. You might have them be able to put bows in a bag. And then you can also incorporate holiday smells. So whether it's essential oils or different sprays or things like that, you might have something that smells like a pine tree or smells like an apple pie or pumpkin pie, and those different things that they can smell and kind of bring back those memories from those holidays. And then similar with the gardening. So the smelling of flowers. I like to plant at work a lot of herbs like basil and mint and different kinds, oregano, and then we can go around and pick them and rub them and smell them and talk about the smell and see what they like. This here is a activity calendar that we put together. So it just breaks down the week, and you can come up with, even if it's just one thing each day, one activity or one outing, one thing that you're going to do, and there's a place to jot down what supplies you might need or any preparation. So you can print this out. It will be in the downloadables, along with lots of other great kind of activity ideas and a resource directory for all sorts of other materials related to this. Here's a snapshot of those resources that you'll find in the PDF. All these links will be clickable, so it'll easily take you right to the website. The first one is Print, Play, Learn from Hewlett-Packard. They've got lots of different things like coloring book pages, holiday decorations, things that can be cut out and such. This MindStart is a great Pinterest page that's got lots of different crafty kind of ideas for people with dementia. SNS Worldwide is one that I use professionally. A lot of the products that they have, they are kind of bulk supply, but you can find different games and things on there. And then if you do have something that you know that your loved one enjoys or you were successful with, like building birdhouses or models or things like that, you can get a dozen or so in a package, and they're pretty inexpensive. We also mentioned the National Holiday Calendar, and there's the link for that. And we've talked about Active Minds before. And then the last one is the L's store. So they've got not only activity things, but other caregiving supplies that you might need that you didn't think about. So we hope you download that link and get some use out of it. We will see you in the next lesson, which is all about travel.